big drivers of donor retention as being things like satisfaction with the quality of service provided by the fundraising team and trusting the organisation to do what it says it's going to do with the beneficiary group and to deliver that change for society. So we were interested to see how those kind of factors play out against this notion of identity. And working with DTV, a telephone agency, they did for us 1,000 telephone interviews to kind of get a sense of how people felt about their favourite charity. And what you see here, this is an amalgam of satisfaction and trust, is that by and large people are pretty satisfied and have a pretty reasonable degree of trust in their favourite charity. And we measured it on kind of a 5-point scale from no satisfaction, no trust, right the way through to higher scores on the 7-point scale there. And you can see that actually people are pretty satisfied with their favourite charity. The mean score there I think is about 6, something like that. Now compare that with identity. Now the question here was, how important is the work of this charity to your sense of who you are? And you can see that the distribution of that is kind of different, really. Again, it's measured on a 7-point scale, and you can see that there are an awful lot of people who say, yeah, actually, this is really at the core of who I am as a person. And you've got this kind of a tail of people who, well, aren't too sure about those things. Why does it matter? Well, if I put both up on the same slide, you can see that those two distributions are quite different. And in terms of satisfaction and trust, there's probably not a huge amount more that we can do there, because everybody at the moment is pretty satisfied anyway. But there is this kind of longer tail with identity. And understanding that there's that little bit more variation there, well, maybe, if it turns out that these things are linked to giving behaviour, maybe we can do something with that as fundraisers. So, let's see whether they are related to giving behaviour. And what we're doing here is performing a regression analysis which tells us a little bit about that relationship. We're asking people, how likely are you to increase the level of your monthly gift? Because everybody we surveyed was making monthly gifts to one or other organisations. And we asked them about how satisfied they were and their level of trust and how close it was to them as a person. And what we found, surprisingly, if you look at that 0.563 figure there in the second column, is that there's a pretty strong relationship between how satisfied people are and how trusting they are and their likelihood of increasing the level of their monthly gift. It's no great surprise. You kind of expect that if people are very happy, they're going to give you more in the future. The problem, though, is when you look at that, what that regression tells me is, and remember, these things are measured on 7-point scales, a half-point increase in satisfaction and trust would deliver me a 1-point increase in the likelihood of my increasing my monthly gift. Right? Half-point increase in satisfaction and trust delivers a 1-point increase in the likelihood of my increasing my gift. So that's a good thing to do, right? The problem is that when you go back to my graph, there isn't much scope for getting another half-a-point increase in terms of satisfaction, because it's already up at an average of 6. So squeezing it up higher, that's kind of tough for a fundraiser to do if they want people to increase the level of their gift. What else? Well, if you put identity into that equation, you can see that the effect size of identity is, well, it's a bit smaller. But the good news in terms of identity is, if you go back to that graph again, there's a heck of an opportunity there to try and increase how important people feel about that cause relative to themselves. And so what I'm going to do is share with you some of the work that we've been doing on identity and using that identity to increase things that we care about as fundraisers, things like the level of the average gift.